Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. We want to continue with the breaking news from the 2020 campaign trail. Presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden has made his choice for a running mate. The former vice president has chosen, as you just heard, Senator Kamala Harris to join him on the ticket. The 55-year-old first-term California senator also served as the state's attorney general from 2011 to 2017. Harris also ran for the Democratic nomination for president in 2020. She was briefly one of the highest-profile candidates before dropping out late last year. If elected, Harris would be the first female vice president. Joining me now with more is CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns, Joel Payne, CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist, Antjuan Seawright, CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. Welcome to all of you. I can't see you because my little program monitor doesn't work. I trust you're there, though. Caitlin, let's start with you. I want to jump off a point that Margaret just made as they were closing out that special report. This idea that the announcement itself, so widely anticipated, but it did not actually leak. Do we know when this decision was made by the Biden campaign?
It is pretty incredible, Elaine, that in this day and age, this is a decision that was kept extremely close to the former vice president and a small group of advisors. Also, the idea that Joe Biden broke the news himself. His campaign had been telling us and the public that if you want to know who the pick will be, sign up for the text alerts. Well, I can tell you I signed up for those on both of my phones and through email, trying to get prepared, and they came indeed with that news, the text did. So that's how everybody found out at the same time. So Joe Biden breaking his own news there. I think it's important to note the historic nature of this pick. I don't think we can say that enough. If Kamala Harris is elected, as you noted, she would be the first woman vice president. She is not the first woman to be a running mate. Of course, we've had Geraldine Ferraro and Sarah Palin, but she is the first running mate of as an African American and an Asian American. Remember, her mother immigrated from India. She also notably graduated from a historically black college and university of Howard University. That is critically an important biographical note, given that we've seen Black voters play such a critical role and will continue to do so, especially Black women being the real driver and force of the Democratic Party at this point. And ever since Biden announced that he would choose a woman as a running mate, he had been under pressure by activists and outside groups and lots of Democrats to pick a woman of color. They were arguing that that represents the future of the Democratic Party. There are lots of questions given Biden's age about the historic nature of this pick and the importance of this pick, kind of this pick being noting kind of the next generation of leadership perhaps in the Democratic Party.
All right, now to our Democratic strategist, starting with you, Antjuan. What's your reaction to this pick?
Well, I'm excited because I have a niece, three of them. I have a mother, a sister, aunt, the son of sharecropping grandmothers. And so now all of them can look at 2020 and say they too can be one of them, and that is the first African-American woman to be vice presidential nominee for any party, any nominating party. I also want to congratulate my friend Kamala Harris. I don't know a more qualified person to be on the ticket with Joe Biden. I think she not only complements him, she brings things to the table that could bring this party together in the end. And AKA a Lynx, HBCU graduate, Howard University, a lawyer. She made history in California. I am totally convinced she will make history in this country again. For those who've been paying attention, this is a great example of how this business we're in called politics is a game of addition and multiplication, not subtraction or division. Kamala Harris ran against Joe Biden in the presidential preference primary. Now she is on the ticket with him. This is, for me, very exciting because I'm starting to see our party, in the words of Mike Tyson, peak at the right time and come together, and so we can win up and down the ballot in November.
Joel, same question to you. What's your reaction? And also, just to jump off Antjuan's point, what is it that you see Senator Harris brings to this ticket?
Well, I think all the comments from Caitlin and Antjuan are appropriate. And what I would also say is this, politically speaking, this is the most Biden pick that Joe Biden could have made. This is consistent with everything that the former vice president has done, from the way he has messaged his campaign, from the construction of this campaign, from the voter groups he's targeted. This is on message and on brand with everything that Joe Biden has brought to bear this election cycle. I would also say, just in terms of the advantage of this pick, this is a pick you can sell to all parts of the Democratic coalition. If you're a progressive, Kamala Harris is not Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, but she's progressive enough. If you're an African-American woman, you see representation in her. If you're an AAPI Democrat, you see representation in her. If you're a woman, a college-educated woman, you see representation in her. You can sell this pick to all the different disparate groups of the Democratic Party that Joe Biden needs to win in November. And I think that this will be the pick that makes the fewest waves. There were probably, and pardon the phrase here, there were probably politically sexier picks. There are picks that could have maybe been more narrative driving. But this pick is the one that continues the momentum that Joe Biden has built thus far, and it allows him to kind of continue the uninterrupted ascent that he's been on throughout most of the summer.
What do you mean narrative?
Hey, Elaine, can I say one thing?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Antjuan, go ahead. Yep.
I think there were some people questioning what decision Joe Biden was ultimately going to make about his VP pick. But as Jim Clyburn said so effectively in his endorsement in South Carolina that ultimately changed the game that got us to this point, we know Joe Biden, but most importantly, Joe Biden knows us. It has been very clear from the very beginning of this process, Joe Biden understood where his bread was going to be buttered. That was by African-American voters in South Carolina. He understood who was going to be doing the majority of the buttering. That was African-American women. And as a result, we are here now to this point talking about Kamala Harris, a young lady from Oakland, California, to be on the ticket with Joe Biden that will not only stamp history, but could make another set of history in November. So for anyone who doubts Joe Biden about his affection, his love, and his appreciation for the most loyal constituency in a generation, black voters, the proof is in the pudding with this announcement today.
All right, let's go ahead and bring in from the campaign trail our intrepid 2020 campaign reporter, Bo Erickson, who is following the Biden campaign. So, Bo, first of all, tell us where you are. Tell us if you had any inkling, obviously, that this was coming today.
Well, hi, Elaine. Yes, I am in Wilmington, Delaware, Joe Biden's official hometown here, and he just lives in maybe 10, 15 minutes from here, standing outside the Hotel DuPont. And it is significant in his political career because this is actually where he announced in 1972 that first Senate run. And why am I standing out here today? It's because starting this morning, we started to see production company vehicles and equipment start to be loaded into this very same lobby that he announced in 1972. And we noticed that some of the production vehicles were actually some of the same companies that we're seeing on the Biden campaign trail as well. This afternoon, we started to get some inkling from sources around the campaign that the announcement was maybe going to come today, and so we started to hit the phones real quickly there, and then finally we started to hear that Joe Biden actually made his pick, and then just a little while later we got that email and text message just like everyone else. And while I am standing here in August, I think back to Biden's last in-person rally before COVID-19 pandemic really took hold. It was March 9th. In Detroit, Michigan, and know who was there to endorse him that night? It was Senator Kamala Harris. So they actually had their potentially the last in-person rally as well. So they got that under the books. They just weren't the official ticket yet.
You know, Bo, I'm also reminded you have been covering the Biden campaign for a long time, and we all remember last summer at that Democratic debate, there was that moment when Senator Harris went after Joe Biden, and it was on the question of busing, and Senator Harris brought up her own personal experience of having been bused. Will you just remind us about that, and also what you had heard regarding whether or not that was a factor in this decision?
So yes, that was a jaw-dropping moment of this 2020 campaign trail. It was the first debate And from my reporting at the time and then since then in the year and a half, it has shown that it was really took the Biden campaign and a lot of his senior aides that have been with him for a long time, it really took them off guard because they did not think that she specifically would go after Joe Biden. That it seemed a little bit personal to them because on one hand, right a month before that decision, she was posting online about her friendship with Beau Biden, his son, and then just a month later, she was questioning his record on that race issue of busing. Senior Biden campaign officials were really bristled at that. But when we were asking Joe Biden about it this fall, it was December actually, when Senator Harris dropped out of the race, we ran after Joe Biden on the campaign trail, and he seemed actually pretty sad, I guess is the right word, that she was actually dropping out of the race. He said that he wished her all the good energy in the world, and that he said Senator Harris could be a Supreme Court justice, and he said that day that she could be vice president, and he also said she could also be president. And as we know, that is one of the criteria that Joe Biden had, is that whoever he picks could be president at a moment's notice, wherever he needed it. Since then, we heard, I'm sure it's been mentioned on the program too, I was running around, that he does not hold grudges. We were trying to see if he would actually stick by that and if he would hold that pledge to not hold grudges, and it seems like he has.
All right, Bo Erickson for us. Bo, I know it's been a very busy day, and it's going to be a very busy next 24 hours for you. Thank you so much, Bo. I want to turn back to Joel Payne and the rest of our panel. But Joel, let me start with you. That moment that Bo was just talking about during that Democratic primary, even though Bo talked about the fact that there hadn't been sort of any residual, clearly, hard feelings, was that nevertheless a surprise to activists within the Democratic Party? And was that, you think, a consideration at all in these deliberations?
I think it depends on who you are in terms of whether or not it was a consideration. It's pretty clear it was a topic of conversation within the Biden headquarters. And look, I've talked to people with Team Biden as well. It did ruffle feathers. It ruffled feathers at the time. And as you know, Caitlin, your reporting probably bears this out. There are hard feelings that are carried along. You want to find someone holding a grudge, go ask someone who's worked on a political campaign. So that's just kind of the nature of the beast. But I do think that with the value of time and with the opportunity to reflect, I think Joe Biden made a choice to figure who would be the best partner, just like he was a partner for Barack Obama 12 years ago, who would be the best partner in making his case to the American public and also to bring together the Democratic Party. And so I think that that ultimately won out. I think that Senator Harris, certainly in that moment, despite the fact that she may have upset some of the Biden loyalists in that camp, I think she also showed that she is a major league, top tier player on the national political scene, and that she's unafraid. And I think she probably, even if she irritated the former vice president, she probably impressed him as well with how she handled herself and the fact that she did go for the brass ring, so to speak.
Antjuan, let me ask you. Oh, go ahead. Yes, Caitlin.
Elaine, Joel brings up a really important point about that debate moment. And, you know, talking to the Kamala Harris campaign in the weeks and months after that, they did acknowledge that that was kind of gave them a sugar high, because remember, she did end up sinking in the polls and bowed out of the race before the voting and the caucuses came underway. But Joel brings up a really important point about how that moment could have factored into Biden's decision, because a huge critical part of being a vice presidential candidate is that you are the attack dog. I'm marking this date on the calendar, the debate with Vice President Pence, only once. Elaine, you know those kinds of environments very well, having moderated one. This will be this is an important moment, especially in this age where we're not having a traditional campaign, and we're not going to be seeing these candidates kind of in the campaign setting as we're used to seeing them. We're going to see them doing lots of virtual events and lots of small events. So that debate, I would argue, could play an outsized importance throughout this process, because that will be one of kind of the few times to really see candidates go head to head. And she not only showed that in that debate against Joe Biden and subsequent debates, but a lot of supporters of hers often point to her perch on the Judiciary Committee and the ways in which she has questioned top Trump administration officials, Bill Barr, the Attorney General, chief among them. Lots of those appearances have been clipped and gone viral. She has asked direct questions that have been really have helped her to amplify her stature. So I think that is a critical point about what kind of role she could play. And in the final weeks of her campaign, she really made this about the case against, prosecuting the case against Donald Trump. And as we know, having talked to voters throughout this primary process, seeing it in our polls, that is the #1 priority for Democratic voters heading into November.
Let's go back to Antjuan for a moment, because Antjuan, I want to ask you about how much the political landscape has shifted in 2020 compared to 2016, especially when you talk about questions of race. I'm thinking about polls that, for instance, which showed in the wake of George Floyd's death, there was a significant majority of Americans who supported what it was that the Black Lives Matter demonstrators were protesting about. And I wonder how different the context is now and what this particular choice of Kamala Harris does in this environment that we're in right now.
Well, the temperature not only in this party has changed, but the temperature in the country has changed. And anytime big events have happened in the American experiment as we know it, big change has come as a result. I am totally convinced, not only with Joe Biden's loyalty to the people who brought him to the dance, but I firmly believe some of the events that have happened over the past several days, weeks, and months have also been a big push to get us to this point. And I think we cannot turn down the volume on that. Secondly, I think that this is a friendly reminder about African Americans' loyalty to the Democratic Party. And this is a true way to show our appreciation, affection, and love for their loyalty to showing up to vote election after election, particularly when it comes to African American women. And I don't know a place in this party that Kamala Harris can not only go into, but sit down in a room and talk to any voter who even thinks about voting Democratic. And I think that matters. At the end of the day, when you think about some of the things we continue to go through as African Americans in this country, it's so important to have one of our own at the table versus continuously having us on the menu. I am so glad that Kamala Harris will be at the table as a Black woman, as a mom, and as someone who I think will represent our community and our issues well. And when we get to a governing standpoint, she will be able, I think, to demonstrate and pull together and pull through the agenda of Joe Biden, just as he did for Barack Obama.
Let's bring into this conversation Leslie Sanchez. She is a CBS News political analyst and Republican strategist. Great to see you, Leslie. Let me ask you about something Caitlin mentioned a moment ago, this idea that you are going to have now on this Democratic ticket a prosecutor to help prosecute the case against Donald Trump. And when you look at polls with respect to his handling of the coronavirus pandemic, you see that most Americans do not give him high marks for that performance. What do you think of this pick of Senator Harris as Joe Biden's VP choice? And do you see potential vulnerabilities there for Senator Harris and for the Biden ticket?
There's tremendous vulnerabilities. I mean, on the one sense, it's a really strong positive anytime you have a woman that is ascending to that position. I mean, you can't deny that. To have a woman of color, we have to really understand the significance of that is tremendous. But just to your point, Elaine, about the prosecutorial nature of her, not only her presidential candidacy, as she turned that lens previously on Joe Biden during the debates, but also the nature of that falls very nicely in what the president is saying. Is this is the Democratic establishment that is here to prosecute me with tremendous oversight, regardless of what we're trying to do to work together, the president's argument, and make America better, right? Make America great. Try to get the Democrats off their heels to come together to find solutions. And I'm probably making it sound a lot nicer than I think than the Trump message has actually been. That's probably what it should be. But this folds into demonizing that idea that the Trump campaign from the beginning never had a fair stance. And so, one, I think that the Trump campaign, very excited Republicans, this is exactly the type of pick they wanted to see. On the other side, I think women candidates particularly, and women that ascend to those top tiers, are looked at through the three C's: credibility, competency, and sometimes, as a pejorative, charisma. Do they have that star power to debate on a stage, to draw an audience, and to raise money? And now the lens will turn to those criteria, fair or not fair, in how she's going to be able to balance and, as the Democrats hope, improve the ticket.
So, Leslie, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was asked before the decision was announced about this, and he said, "It's always interesting to speculate about the choice, but it almost never makes a difference." He went on to say it'll be interesting to see who he picks, but in the end, people will vote on the two at the top, Trump or Biden. What's your thought on that, Leslie? In the end, given the environment that we're in the middle of a pandemic, that there is right now a national reckoning when it comes to racial issues in this country that's taking place, how much do you think this particular choice of a vice president is going to matter?
For the Republicans, it's a mobilizing effect. It's exactly the type of candidate they need to look back at her record, to look back, they're going to say the bi-coastal liberalism, right, that you have from West and East Coast, and certainly on the West Coast and the state she represents, that's everything wrong with America. It's going to fall, already you're seeing messages into talking points about the contrast is very rich. But McConnell's exactly right. This comes to the top of the ticket. In many cases, again, it's another referendum on the president, how you feel about his leadership. But for, let's say, not even the never Trumpers, but Republicans who have went from sitting on their hands to wringing their hands to tremendous frustration about the Republican Party and this particular ticket. This does not give them that lifeline of hope. This looks like another progressive pull to the left is what the argument's going to be. So trying to pick up some of those soft voters who maybe were not as excited about turning out for Trump, it's now, I believe, something that's going to energize, ultimately, voters to coalesce back around the Trump campaign.
And to your point, Leslie, as you're speaking, I see that the president apparently tweeted an attack ad against Senator Harris. So things moving very quickly here, but exactly what you were just talking about, this notion of, in the words of this ad, quote, rushing to the radical left. Joel, let me ask you about that line of attack with someone like a Senator Harris. How effective do you think that may be?
Oh, I don't think it will be effective at all. And I think that's probably why so many Democrats are excited about this pick today. Kamala Harris is very hard to box in as some wild-eyed lefty who is going to veer the country far to the left. Like I said, you can sell Kamala Harris to progressives. You know, some progressives probably she's not going to be their cup of tea, but she's progressive enough. But she's also going to be comfortable to moderates, to conservative Democrats, to center of the party Democrats, frankly, like Joe Biden, who don't want the country to go so far to the left that it's out of step with some of the, more centrist traditions of the party. So I don't think that's going to work on Kamala Harris. If you look at her record, if you go and look at what she actually has done on Capitol Hill, I've talked to some folks who've worked in the Senate at the same time as Kamala Harris. And what they'll tell you is that she gets plaudits, not just from Democrats, but from Republicans for her work on the Intelligence Committee. She's not somebody who is seen as someone who is going to fly off the handle and maybe say something that is just going to appeal to the base of her party. She is progressive enough, but she is not going to be somebody that's going to be easily caricatured. And I think, again, that's why so many Democrats are probably breathing a sigh of relief that she is the choice, along with all of the other, various reasons that we've talked about her diversity and about her skill and the type of number two she can be for Joe Biden, but also because of what she signals. This is a good moment for Democrats who are concerned that the party might get trapdoored into going too far left.
Caitlin, we only have a... Yeah, go ahead, Antjuan. Yep.
Keep in mind that this is now about Donald Trump and Mike Pence versus Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. Now America will have a choice and decide between the two. This election will likely boil down to 5 or 7 states. If you look back at 2016, the elections were small margins. If African Americans had turned out in a few places in 3 or 4 states, we would have had a different result in the election. I'm a firm believer that Kamala Harris can go in those places, those states that will likely decide the general election in November, and really make up the difference and galvanize and energize voters from across the Democratic platform that could eventually change the game of this country forever.
And I just want to get Caitlin's take here right before we go to break. Yeah, Caitlin, just the idea of how unified does the Democratic Party appear to be at this moment?
Well, they appear to be unified around the prospect of defeating Donald Trump, and we've seen that in polls. We've seen that in our CBS News Battleground Tracker, that those supporting Joe Biden most of them are doing so because it's an opportunity to defeat Donald Trump. This is certainly a pick that would help Biden energize some of the factions that have not yet been energized by his candidacy. In other words, trying to convert voters to support his ticket affirmatively, not just as a vehicle for defeating Donald Trump. So that's something to watch for over the next week when we see more of this ticket and when we see the Democratic National Convention in its virtual form take place next week. That is the goal of the party.
All right, and with that, we are going to head to break. I want to thank you all, Joel, Antjuan, Caitlin, and Leslie. Thank you all so much. Finally, we have the news we've been waiting for.